Well, labor groups have condemned the federal government's decision to increase the salaries of civil servants in the country, but not announce a new minimum wage. On Tuesday, the government raised salaries between 25% and 35% amid the cost of living crisis. Now, labor unions have given the government a May 31 deadline to come up with a new minimum wage, with their ideal figure at 615,000 naira a month.
Well, with us in the studio is the Director of Media and Publicity of Nigeria Labour Congress, Benson, Upah. Good to see you, and always a pleasure honouring our invitation. Let's first, it's not too late in the day to still say Happy Workers' Day.
Thank you very much.
And let's see how we can sustain the happiness which many workers would want to see on a daily basis. 615,000 naira. And there wasn't any categorical statement from the government on the day. Has there been any conversation in the last 24 hours to address this?
To the best of my knowledge, there has been none. But that is not to discountenance what the government has done. What it has offered is complementary. And we're not naive enough not to recognize that. It has nothing to do with the national minimum wage process or procedure. The national minimum wage process or procedure is fixed in the country. It takes the form of a conversation. There are consultations. There are statistical data to look at, to analyze. At the end of it all, an offer is made and a counter offer is made based on practical realities. Cost of living, we can look at them and itemize them. Basic rent, basic transportation, basic cost of food, specific food items, all of those things are taken into consideration. And we're looking at the regular nuclear family, that is one man, one wife, and 4 children, not more than that. But of course, the typical African society will have much more than that. You have, after your children, you have extended family members, but here where we're looking at that regular nuclear family. So by the time you look at those, what there is, you find out that 615,000 naira proposed by the 2 labor centers is most reasonable. You know, the statistics speak for themselves. Let's start with the removal of the so-called fuel subsidy, which has thrown the entire country into a tailspin. Let us look at the floatation of the naira, the policy, which they brilliantly couched as the collapse of the exchange rates in order to eliminate corruption and all of that. But of course, which snowballed the naira from 350 to the dollar to 1,900 naira to the dollar. And the consequential effects, and most recently, the 250% tariff hike in energy. Those policies are inherently destructive. They have demobilized, dislocated, and disoriented the entire country. There's no one left standing, not even the manufacturers.
All right, Mr.
They issued a disclaimer. Say, look, where we did say good policy, we didn't tell us how they are going to be implemented. So who is left standing?
Okay, you've explained some sort of the factors that made the labor union arrive to 615,000 naira. You've also said, look, this increase that the federal government has done doesn't really impact on the ongoing negotiations. Let's talk about the deadline set for the federal government, May 31. These negotiations seem to be quite complex. May 31 is just a few weeks, or even you can say a couple of days before you know it, it'll get to that deadline. What sort of actions should be put in place to expedite these negotiations? And two, if there's no resolution, what sort of action should we expect from Labour?
First, let me tell you this, that the deadline issued by the organized labor is most reasonable. This process didn't come as a surprise. We have a 4-yearly cycle, and the government was in the know from 2019 till date. But obviously did little or nothing to speed up this process. On our part, we alerted the government, say, look, it is time to commence this process. But government slept on this process, decided to choose the snail speed. Okay?
I mean, what's
and
that?
In any case,
sorry, because I'm trying to see how much we can pack up here before we run out of time. As Nkechi said, you're already counting down. Today's May 2nd, and the persons concerned are already asking what next. But has there ever been some sort of conversation between organized labor and the minister in charge? I think that should be the government representative in this case.
We have done everything reasonably possible. As I told you, this process takes a 4-yearly cycle, 2019 to now. Okay, our government knew that by the end of March, a new minimum wage was supposed to come into place. We alerted the government to this process. So, but the government didn't act appropriately. It took it that at the time it was supposed to initiate this process, it did not. And even when the committee was put in place, what government was supposed to have done within certain time frames, government didn't do that. Consultations, when were the zonal consultations put in place? But let me just tell you how this process works. Once a notice is served that this process is due, certain statistics are supposed to be put in place. Consultations are supposed to be had. And when you bring back the results of those consultations from the zones that relate to capacity, need, all of that, they are to be analyzed. After that, a formal demand is made based on practical realities, cost of living index, all of those things are put into it. It's a basket. And the stakeholders, the employers, government, and workers. So they come together, they look at all of this, what is practical, what is realistic.
And you know, government can be vague. So which of the ministries or ministers or
all
persons,
the government, in fact, when we say government here,
beautiful.
When we talk about government here,
in your communication,
who
do you address?
This process, labor is on the exclusive list. So once we relate with the government of the center, it transmits our communications down to the states and to the local governments.
Mr. Upah, who exactly does if you have a communication that you have activated to send a reminder to the government, which office does it go to?
It depends on what the issues are. But on this specific matter, it went to the office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation.
So in other words, that's within the presidency.
Presidency. The presidency was put on notice at the appropriate time, and presidency was expected to act expeditiously. Okay? Now, an issue is actually up for debate. We had the government say that the minimum wage would start in May, something like that. But that's not right. The new national minimum wage is expected to start March, April, at the expiration of the last one. So, and government ought not to have been taken by surprise. We are looking at 4 years, preparation, expectation, and action. So, government should not be taken by surprise.
And if they're not taken by surprise, this is something that we were talking about a couple days earlier. Patterns don't lie. This is something that after every 4 years, after a couple of months, we always come back to discuss this. What is that? There has to be a foundational issue. There has to be a fundamental problem. There has to be a bottleneck that's stopping this from going forward. In your perspective, what is that?
Other than the unpreparedness on the part of the government, other than lack of political will, other than the perennial disregard for the value of the workforce, nothing else. Let me tell you something. The model we have adopted in Nigeria is about the most friendly one. There are other models, one of which is as inflation moves, wages also move. There are others that do not follow this 4-yearly cycle. They follow a yearly cycle.
But in this case,
so I look at it 4 years. This is the most reasonable, the most friendly. Why is government trying to take advantage of this? This reasonableness.
We'll stay on this, and that's why I asked specifically so that we know where this communication is, and in this case, it's within the presidency, and we'll like to have this conversation again just before the expiration of deadline. We'd like to thank you for your time, Benson. Upah. Always a pleasure having you.